Phil Andrew, former FBI agent, national security contributor for NewsNation, is with us now. Phil, take us through what law enforcement is doing. There's not a whodunit. There's not a how did they do it, because we saw. What are the questions left to answer, and how do you go about answering those, not from the victim side, from the suspect side?
They're going to continue to comb over this crime scene and recover every piece of evidence, every shell casing. They're going to try to get the trajectory of who was shot, where, and when. And all that's going to go into their final report to understand exactly what happened, help explain this to the victims and the victims' families, and understand what prevention can take place. They're also going to be scrubbing social media and looking for any kind of motive, any sort of intent here, and where there might have been opportunities upstream for preventing this.
Phil, there's nothing that prepares anyone for this type of crime scene. So for law enforcement who are having to process this scene and take in the evidence, when it's children, I can't think of anything worse. And no way can you prepare or be ready for what that means.
It's devastating. Even for those that are trained to run to the sound of gunfire, stumbling upon a scene like this is tormenting, and it will be very difficult on the mental health for these first responders. And they're going to have to take care to recognize that. The departments are going to have to give folks time to debrief this and talk about this, and it's going to have a ripple effect for this community, just like it has for the entire country. This is actually our 212th mass shooting this year. So we are having more than one mass shooting a day. And it's tragic, but it is also time to take some serious look at what can be done to prevent these.
Well, from your perspective in law enforcement, what more can be done? I mean, let's start with just schools in general and school security. What's the next step?
Well, I think the next step is really doing everything you can to make sure that dangerous people don't get weapons in the first place. And then once we identify somebody that is a danger to themselves or others, that we have the tools for removing the weapons until they're stabilized. And some states have those tools, some states don't. We also want to take a look at who we allow access to guns in the first place. Texas took a bold move in 2012 and lowered the age for access to handguns, which facilitated, a sale here at 18. You can hear this from any social scientist about, juvenile brain development, that the brain's not even fully developed till 26. And you were taking a lot of risk with giving guns to folks who are not stable mentally and youth that haven't had fully developed brains when they're not using guns in controlled circumstances.
Hey, Phil, I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of these minutes that turn into hours or seconds that turn into hours when this happened. Timeline, shooter gets these weapons in his home, shoots his grandmother, drives to the school. We don't know why he got to the school or we picked this school, and then went in and began shooting and killing. To kill 21 people takes at least a bit of time. And I'm thinking back to the lessons from Columbine: go in, don't have the perimeter outside, and the like. What do you make of the timeline that we saw? What does it tell you about watching this video, for example, of the shootout between law enforcement and the suspect?
That seconds matter, and the type of weapon and the position that somebody's in makes a big difference in the level of mayhem that they can deliver. Law enforcement was in relative hot pursuit of this person, and you got to give them a lot of credit for how quickly they responded. But seconds matter, and in this case, given the weapons that he had, the reports that he was wearing protective armor, and the close access that he had to the children contributed to the level of mayhem.
Phil, before we let you go, I can't think of anything worse than these families waiting to hear the news about their children, and the DNA testing at a crime scene like this. Is that standard? Is that something that you would expect to see happen, and is there any other way?
Unfortunately, given the type of weapon that was used and the rounds that weapon fires, the devastation that it causes at close range could contribute to a lot of confusion in the identification of these children. So I think this is unusual in this circumstance, but this is an unusual attack, given that it is an elementary school. We don't see that very often. There have been a handful of these kinds of attacks, and the type of weapon used both contribute to making that a difficult case. And I think also trying to prevent these families from having to do a in-person identification. That in and of itself is a pretty devastating thing to ask them to do. And I think DNA is a logical way of moving around that.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.